But in chapter 9, I had my least and most favorite part in the same chapter. My least favorite was Ninny talking about, and I had the audiobook, okay? So I had the narrator going, don't you just think bugs are so cute? Aren't they just the cutest things ever? I'm like, are you kidding me? Bugs are disgusting, okay? So
bugs. I was like, what are you saying?
Bugs.
What is that word?
Bugs. Yeah.
Bugs. Got it.
She was like, don't you think bugs are just the cutest things you ever did see? I'm like, no, I don't, actually. And she went on to talk about how she loves bugs, and I was like, can't relate.
Hi everyone, welcome to BYOB, the Bring Your Own Book podcast. I'm Nikki.
I'm Tilly.
And I'm Kelly.
In this episode, we're talking about the classic Southern novel Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fannie Flagg, which was first published in 1987. Here's the publisher's synopsis from Tilly.
It's first the story of two women in the 1980s, of gray-headed Mrs. Threadgood telling her life story to Evelyn, who is in the sad slump of middle age. The tale she tells is also of two women, of the irrepressibly daredevilish tomboy Idgie and her friend Ruth, who back in the 30s ran a little place in Whistle Stop, Alabama, a southern kind of cafe woebegone, offering good barbecue and good coffee and all kinds of love and laughter, even an occasional murder.
Yes. So, the drink we've chosen to pair with this episode is called Backyard Sweet Tea, and it's made with spiced rum, sweet tea, or iced tea if you're from Canada, orange peel, and mint leaves. This is a fun take on the classic Southern thirst-quencher sweet tea, which was on the menu of the Whistle Stop Cafe. Wouldn't you know it?
Okay, great. Are we all ready to give her a try?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love iced tea with or without alcohol, so I'm ready.
Okay, let's
Yum.
go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Tastes exactly like what I thought it was going to taste like.
Oh, this is a patio drink.
I love that mint leaf and orange peel. Yum.
Mhm. Definitely one of the better ones we've had.
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of a guaranteed hit. Like we all were like, ooh, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get into our 5-star ratings. Like always, we all rate things differently when we rate on the 5-star system. We do this because of Goodreads, not because we feel like we need to rate everything out of 5. Tilly, why don't you start us off?
I'd love to. Yeah. I love this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5. My rating system is often just based on how I feel when I finish the book. So while I wouldn't say this is like a perfect book for me, like it took me a while to settle into it. I found the narrative structure a little confusing at the beginning, and there were so many characters to keep track of. But by the end of it, I had gotten so invested in the story and in the characters, and I shed a tear. And I just closed the book and thought, wow, I have so many feelings right now. And that to me is a 5-star book. So that was my experience. I loved it.
Oh, that's so nice. I shed many tears.
Yeah, I say I shed a tear to be like cool, but I cried a lot.
Yeah. It's one of those. Kelly, why don't you tell us what you thought about the book?
Okay, sure. So, as you both know already from, I'm going to say off air or off camera, from outside of the podcast, I was a little nervous going into this because I just had the sense that it was going to be kind of like the divine secrets of the Yaya sisterhood, and I'm not into that kind of vibe. But I saw that you both read it and rated it on Goodreads, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I felt like I went into it very open-minded, and I gave it a really good shot. I'm stuck between a 2.5 and a 3 for me because there were parts that I liked, but there were a lot of parts that I didn't care about, like for better or worse. I was just kind of like, okay. So I just feel like overall, I didn't really know what the point of it all was. I felt like there was a lot of filler, and there were so many minor characters that at times I was confused and I had to remind myself who they were, because some of these characters were very quick introductions and then they would come back like every few years, right? And I'm like, okay, wait, who are they? It also kind of gave me, I feel bad saying this, but like knockoff To Kill a Mockingbird vibes, which I already know that book has problems. I know that. I enjoyed that book a lot more when I read it in high school. So I didn't hate this one, but I didn't love it. I wish I ended it feeling heartwarmed and shedding tears, but I didn't shed any tears. And yeah, I guess I have a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts, so I am very interested to talk to you both about it and how you felt about things, because I just feel like I just didn't get what everyone was talking about, I guess, and why this is such a beloved book. So I would love to talk to you both about it, because I think I just didn't get it. So I don't know. It was just kind of like, to me.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I should say, too, I don't know that I was heartwarmed at the end. I think I was like, I had a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think for me, the book portrayed a lot of real life issues in a very realistic way. So, Kelly, you were saying you felt like there wasn't a lot going on. But for me, I find when I read books, I'm really interested in people's everyday life. Right, so like a snapshot. For me, the not a lot going on and maybe those things that might seem a little bit more boring, I was personally very into, because I was thinking, this is real life for these people. And all of these characters to me felt like real people when I got to the end of the book. So that being said, I rated this book 5 stars. I wanted to read this for the podcast. I had never read the book before, but I'm a huge fan of the movie. And I've seen the movie so many times, I don't even know how many. And I don't even remember the first time I watched it. I feel like I was born and I knew what this movie was. That's how long ago it was since the first time I've seen it. So the reading experience for me, I can see why Tilly was very confused at the beginning with the timelines. Yeah. I didn't have that problem because I watched the movie, which is told in a linear timeline. So you see Evelyn and Ninny, they're in the 1980s, and their story is linear in the book and in the movie. And then also the stuff that happens in Whistle Stop and in, is it Virginia or Georgia? All of that,
it's Georgia.
All that stuff in the past happens linear in the movie. So when things were happening in the book, I could automatically, without looking at the dates, be like, oh yeah, this happens after this, because I've seen the movie so many times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question. In the book, with the flashbacks, she went back and forth in time, even in the flashbacks. So you're saying in the movie, the flashbacks were all linear?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So in the movie, you see Kathy Bates plays Evelyn, and she's amazing. And Jessica Tandy plays Ninny. She plays Miss Daisy in Driving Miss Daisy. So they're in the nursing home, and she'll be like, oh yes, and this. And then it goes back in time, and you watch the whole story of Ruth and Iggy from the beginning, when Iggy's older brother something, because it's a spoiler, isn't it?
I guess so, yeah. That makes sense.
But yes, it's
I'm really
linear.
interested to see the movie. I had never seen the movie. I'd never read the book before this experience, but I'd heard a lot about it, and I kind of had like a vague understanding of it being like classic Southern literature, and that was pretty much all I knew. I did not know why the title was so long. Still don't know, but that's another story.
They did cut the title down for the movie. It's just called Fried Green Tomatoes, which I like better, I think.
Me too. It's needlessly long.
Yes.
But I'd be really interested to see the movie. Actually, after I finished the book, I went to imdb.com and was like looking up on like who played this person. Oh, cool. Okay, face to the name. Okay, interesting. And then I was reading a bit about the movie, and Fannie Flagg did write the screenplay as well. And then I went into a deep dive, and Fannie Flagg had a short cameo in Grease, the movie, in 1978. She was an actor and a screenwriter, and she was the school nurse. Yeah.
What?
So anyway, fun little tidbit.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
Oh my god. Wow. Sorry, we just kind of like bombarded you during your review.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Nikki.
That's okay. 5 stars. It was great.
Yay.
I have so many good things to say about this book. Were there some things where I was like, oh yeah, I don't really need that? Yes, there were, because a lot of stuff, one thing from watching the movie before I read the book, I know it's a lot easier to like a movie when you watch it before you read the book, but I do feel like this movie really, how do I say this? It really encapsulated the point and the feel of the book without necessarily having to have every single aspect in it. I mean, there's only 2 hours to try to cram as much story in as possible. So the movie does follow a lot more closely just to Iggy and Ruth than it does to the rest of the kind of the side characters. But you still get all of the same feelings and the same core issues and everything come up through the movie. So I would really recommend watching it. I think, Kelly, you'd probably like it more than reading the book because you have people there to like kind of portray more of what's
actually
going on.
Yeah, I feel like I would probably like the movie a bit more as well. And like, I'm going to go back to your point about the everyday life stuff. I enjoy that when I can understand why it's there. There were certain parts where I was like, okay, I understand why you're here. But then there were other parts where I was just like, okay, cool, moving on. Like, I just didn't know why it had to be there. So I feel like in the movie, because I haven't seen it, I'm sure they have like streamlined it a bit to focus more, like you said, on Ruth and Iggy, where I'm like, okay, here's the thread through. But like, there were certain moments where I just didn't know why it was there. So I was like, okay, interesting, but let's get back to why I'm here, you know?
Right.
But, you know.
Yeah, I get that. And I found myself wondering that a bit too, because there was so many extra scenes with like the PV children and a lot of the other characters who were kind of like more minor characters. And I also found myself kind of wondering, you know, what is this trying to tell me? They say like in a book or in a movie, everything's there for a reason. Like it's always there on purpose. And then when I finished the book, I realized that some of the moments that stuck with me the most were the ones that I didn't think needed to be there, or the ones that I didn't think I understood at the time, but something about them like stuck with me. And so then I started to think more about like art, and does art need to be explained necessarily? And does it need to be there for a reason? Do I need to understand it, or do I just need to feel it? And for me, I felt it. So I'm sensing that this is an episode where I'm gonna cry. I can feel it coming on already.
When I was looking
just
through
I have
the
so many
book
feelings
earlier, I was crying just reading little parts that I tabbed, and the quote that I picked to read at the end, I was like, I'm gonna cry when I read this. I know I am, because it just even thinking about it makes me like kind of like glassy eyed, because it's so sad, but like happy at the same time. I think that's the thing with this book for me, is even though there were so many sad moments, there was always something kind of like happy lingering there as well. So you got this really confusing balance, honestly, for me when I was going through, where I felt distressed but also heartwarmed at times. Sometimes I was not heartwarmed. There were definitely some really hard moments to read in this book. And even though I think there could be like an argument, like, is it really true because it's written by a white woman and stuff? A lot of this book has to deal with like racism. They're in the Deep South in the 1920s. There's the KKK that plays quite a large role in the subplots and like the background essence of this book. I think even though this was written by a white lady, she did it in a way that was never, or at least I felt like she wasn't ever trying to write from a different perspective from her own. So I really enjoyed that. It didn't feel like she was trying to tell anybody else's story. She was just talking about it from what people would have seen. So I did really like that. But this whole book just took me on like a roller coaster of emotions, and every chapter was so different because the timeline wasn't linear. And I started to like that more as maybe once I got to page 100, I was like, okay, I'm really liking this kind of all over the place situation.
So this is where I feel like a heartless bitch because I'm just like,
Oh no.
I just like, I read it and I didn't feel a lot of the time. I don't know. Like there were some things where I was like, oh, this is really like this is sad, but like I don't know. I wish I could.
You just didn't connect to it.
Yeah,
it sounds
sometimes
like.
things just don't resonate.
I know.
Yeah.
I just feel like so bad being the
She's like, I know.
the black sheep here, being like, I'm happy that you both felt this thing, but I guess this is my Addie LaRue. I'm just like, I didn't get it, and like I was so emotionally connected to that, whereas you were not, Nikki, right? I don't think I'm at the level that you were at for Addie LaRue. I'm not like,
No.
this is the fucking worst, you know, which is totally fine. I don't know. And like, I will talk more once we get to spoilers about like things that happen, obviously, because but yeah, this is why I'm so curious to talk to you too when we get to spoilers about specific things, because I just feel like I probably had the opposite feelings for most things, not everything, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I wrote one of my notes was, you can tell this was written by a white woman. So that's why I'm like, I would love to talk about that a bit later. But I don't know. I would be interested later on to watch the movie because, yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to put a finger on it, but I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Fair.
yeah. But I'm glad you both liked it. I didn't hate my time.
Yeah.
I'm just like at a loss.
Yeah. Well, do we want to move on to some book recommendations if we have any? Because I feel like a lot of the things that we need to talk about are things that we need to talk about specific events
Yes.
and character stuff.
Especially because it's not linear. It's kind of hard to talk spoiler free.
I know it is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I will say just off the top, I don't have a book recommendation for this because I don't read a lot of books like this. I think this is a book that I probably wouldn't have picked up if I hadn't have seen the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, instead of a book recommendation, go watch the movie because it's lovely and it has an amazing cast. So even if you don't love what's happening, you'll have a great time just watching these actors be awesome. So
Cool.
I don't know. Do you guys have any recommendations?
I do.
Great. Kelly, why don't you start us off?
Oh, okay. Okay, I chose a book recommendation based off of like one of the themes of this book because I also don't read a lot of books like this book, like I've already said, I think. So I chose The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I chose to focus on the racism theme and just the experience of Black people in America during that time period, because The Bluest Eye takes place in the 40s as well, but also it goes back in time to like the 20s and 30s and so on. It takes place in Ohio, and the bulk of the story takes place during 1941, and it follows an 11-year-old girl named Pecola Breedlove. And it's a very poetic and intense read. I borrowed this from Tilly last year, and I saw it was like 200 pages, and I was like, oh, I'm going to knock this out in like a week. No, I did not, because it was very dark and intense, which I knew would be intense, but wow, like this is definitely look up content or trigger warnings before you pick it up, because it is very intense and dark, but I also think it's a very important book that people should be reading. I believe it's Toni Morrison's first published novel, and I gave it, I think, a 4.5 out of 5. I probably will give it a 5 next time I read it, because it stuck with me so much. It's just so heartbreaking, and she goes into such vivid detail about a lot of issues with a lot of different characters in this book. So that's why it reminded me of this book a bit, because she does have her central character, but she also goes in depth with other minor characters around the central character. And basically it's about Pecola. Pecola wants to be beautiful and loved like all the white girls around her who have blue eyes and blonde hair. And it kind of just details her life in that 1 year and family members and friends' lives around her. And it's very, very well done. Heartbreaking, but amazing read. So that's what I would recommend.
Great. Tilly,
Thanks.
what about you?
Well, I actually had a couple of different books I could have recommended because I wasn't sure, like Kelly, I was like, I haven't really read a whole lot of stuff like Fried Green Tomatoes, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick one that kind of had to do with like a theme or more about the structure. So I kind of went with a structurally related book that made me feel a lot of feelings as well. So get ready, folks. This is another long title. I chose the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Marianne Schaffer and Annie Barrows.
Ooh.
So this book is not similar really at all in content, but it is a story that's told entirely in letters, so an epistolary book. And I feel that it's a book that made me feel things for a small community of people that was making a lot of sacrifices to help each other out in a difficult time. So Guernsey takes place in 1946 on a tiny British island, and it has a lot of characters, past and present, and you learn kind of more about the small community and how they all band together. So it's a great read. There was a movie recently with Lily James that was really great, and that's the book that I would recommend.
Nice. I did watch the movie and I loved it, and I didn't even know that it was from a book. I just saw it on like Amazon one night and I was like, oh, this looks great, and I love Lily James, so I'm gonna put it on.
It was lovely.
It was a really good movie, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm glad that we got some good recommendations, because I was like, oh no, I was looking around at everything and I was like, I don't feel like any of these books really represent any part of what I was experiencing with this one. So
I have to say, quick little note, when I looked at the book on Goodreads, when you scroll down, it says books recommended or like books other people read. The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood was there. I was like, how dare you, Goodreads?
What do you hate so much about the
yeah,
Divine
you have a
Sisterhood? I've never
huge
read
hang
it.
up about this book.
I don't know the book. I know the movie, and the movie was long and slow, and I did not care. Like, there were a lot of good actors in that movie too. There was frickin' Lady, Dame Maggie Smith, like lady, oh my god. Dame Maggie Smith was in it, carting around her oxygen tank in the movie, because that's what the character does, not Dame Maggie Smith in real life. But I just couldn't stand the movie. I couldn't stand, I think it was like a tempo, like a pacing thing, and they just seemed ridiculous. Like all the what I remember, I was just like, okay, already, like let's move on with our lives. And now I'm stuck with the memory, and I can't move on with my life. So,
Oh my god! Wow.
you asked, I
Watch
answered.
out, world. Yeah,
I did not feel that way
Well-
about this book, I will say.
that's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Because
Yeah.
you were worried about it.
Yep. And with that, we're going to move into spoilers territory. So if you haven't read the book and you don't want to know how it all turns out, you should stop listening right meow. And if you like what you're hearing, feel free to leave us a rating or review on your podcast app of choice. So if you don't want any spoilers, you should skedaddle.
Bye.
Okay, so we're going to begin with a quick recap of the rest of the book so we're all on the same page.
The story is told through many alternating timelines, as in the 1980s, elderly widow Virginia Ninny Threadgood befriends middle-aged housewife Evelyn Couch at the Rose Terrace nursing home and begins telling her life story. We see flashbacks to her childhood in Whistle Stop, Alabama, a tiny town on the railroad, as she grew up as an adopted daughter in the formidable Threadgood family. The chapters are also interspersed with snippets from the Weems Weekly, a newsletter written by postmistress Dot Weems, which give an inside look into life in the small town. Though Ninny's stories span many years, the titular Whistle Stop Cafe often features prominently, run by Idgie Threadgood and Ruth Jameson.
In the 1920s, before the time of the cafe, the Threadgood family lived in a big house with their 7 children and their black nanny, Sipsy. The youngest child, Idgie, is the most memorable. Deeply affected after the tragic death of her favorite brother, Buddy, Idgie becomes wild and rambunctious and is the focus of nearly all the flashbacks. Ninny reveals early on that Idgie was accused of a murder, but she doesn't really believe she could have done it.
When sweet Sunday school teacher Ruth Jameson visits the Threadgoods for a summer, Iggy falls head over heels in love with her. Though Ruth tentatively returns her feelings, she feels obligated to return home to Georgia to marry her fiancé, Frank Bennett. Iggy is heartbroken and spends the next 4 years checking up on Ruth in secret, until she discovers that Frank is a cruel and abusive husband and rescues Ruth, bringing along her intimidating handyman, Sipsy's son, Big George. While telling this story, Ninny reveals that Frank Bennett was the one who was later murdered.
Ruth runs away with Iggy, and they start up the Whistle Stop Cafe, with Sipsy and Big George as cooks, along with Big George's wife, Onzel. The Whistle Stop Cafe serves every person who comes through their doors through the Great Depression and later, despite active segregation laws and judgmental citizens. Ruth discovers she is pregnant with Frank's baby, and she and Iggy raise Buddy Jr. together. And after a railway accident where he loses his arm, Iggy gives him the nickname Stump, so he can claim it before anyone else teases him.
Meanwhile, as Evelyn learns more about Whistle Stop and its residents, she becomes more confident and present in her day-to-day life. Through Ninny's stories, we learn of many eventful moments in Whistle Stop. Ninny's happy marriage with Cleo, one of the Threadgood sons, the escapades of Railroad Bill, a railway thief who gave to the needy, stories about Big George and Onzel's children growing up in the cafe, Ruth's cancer and eventual death, many tales of the fraught race relations in the South during this time, and finally, the murder of Frank Bennett and subsequent trial.
Iggy and Big George stand on trial for the murder, and Iggy lies to give her friends alibis, refusing to let Big George or anyone else involved take the blame. Half the town comes to Iggy's defense, providing her with a fake alibi and saving her from time in prison. Frank Bennett's death is ruled a drunken accident, and no one knows what truly happened. A flashback reveals to the reader that it was actually Sipsy who killed him when he showed up to the cafe and tried to steal baby Stump.
At the end of the novel, Evelyn is happily living her own life and has just enrolled in a fitness retreat when she finds out that Mrs. Threadgood has passed away and left her a box full of memories. Evelyn visits Whistle Stop and sees all the sights she'd been imagining all this time. When she visits Ninny's grave in the Threadgood plot, she notices a note left on Ruth Jameson's grave, signed by Iggy. The last scene of the book shows us that Iggy, now an old woman, operates a roadside vegetable and honey stand with her brother, still serving people with their signature warmth and sense of humor. The end.
Yeah, the end. Tears.
Yeah, I really was unexpectedly affected by the end. It was so simple, just, having Iggy with her brother and the roadside, but it just really got me.
I know.
Oh.
I will say in the movie,
I've read about this.
They make it seem like Ninny is Iggy.
I was wondering about that when I was reading the book. Okay.
She's not.
Mm-hmm.
She's not.
She's a separate character.
Yeah.
She's Iggy's sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the movie ends, you see, actually, Ninny doesn't die in the movie.
Mm.
In the actual story, Evelyn brings her to live with her and Ed. Because she has grown such a strong attachment to Ninny and she doesn't want her to stay in the nursing home, and she knows Ninny isn't happy there. So the last thing we see is the grave of Ruth and a note that was left on the grave from Iggy. And they kind of make it seem like Ninny left it there before Evelyn went and got her. But that's not the case, obviously, as we can see.
I feel like that opens up a lot of tangled things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will say, I don't know if it's because I'm naive or probably more likely because I have been watching the movie since I was so young. They changed something very specific at the beginning of the movie from the book, where we hear when Buddy passes away by getting hit by a train. He's with a girl named, I think, Maria or Martha over on the train tracks. But in the movie, he's with Ruth and they love each other. And Ruth is a few years older than Iggy. She's like 17, the same age as Buddy, and Iggy's probably like 10. So she's in love with Buddy. And so the rest of the movie, it really just seems like they're very good friends.
That's some bullshit. They're in love, and I will
Yeah.
not accept that.
They are in love, and I think, I don't know if it was when this movie was made, people were really uncomfortable with lesbians, or
Probably.
but the movie did win an award from an LGBT kind of here, let me just get the name.
Oh boy, this makes me mad.
Just let them be gay.
yeah.
Let them be gay
So-
and in love.
I can't find it, but so the movie won an award for like lesbian portrayal on screen, which is great, but they did leave it very ambiguous to the like almost to the point where, I mean, I clearly had no idea. I was like, yeah, I think Iggy, it looks like Iggy's in love with Ruth, but Ruth just loves Iggy like a sister, which I think that's kind of how it is portrayed in the book too, like two people around, but everybody seems to know they're together, and they're very, nobody is questioning of that. Everybody just says, oh, Ruth and Iggy, they're together, and that's their son, Buddy Jr.
Yeah, that was what really struck me too, is that everyone like just accepted this relationship in a really lovely way, which I was kind of questioning, like, is this true that this would have happened this way? Probably not.
No.
But the fact that they were always saying, you know, Ruth and Iggy's son, that was really cemented to me. I'm like, well, obviously they're a couple. Like, I always had no doubt that was like, I'm just such a romantic that I'm like, they're in love, and she's gonna run away with her, and they're gonna start a cafe, and they're gonna serve people in it. And I kept highlighting all these sections because I was like, is this gay? Are they in love?
Yeah.
And
Is this
I
gay?
think the first time I realized, what's that?
Is this gay?
Is this gay? The first time it clicked for me was when they were talking about building the cafe, and it was quite early on before you'd seen a lot of the flashbacks. And it was like talking about, and we built a room out back so that Ruth and Iggy would have somewhere to live. And I was like, a room? They would live there together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My little heart was so happy.
I wish there had been more about their relationship, though, because I understand it was written in the 80s, but then I looked up the author and she was not straight. So I just kind of got disappointed because I understand the time, and I spoke to my mom about it a little bit because she had similar feelings as I did, and I had never talked to her about this book or the movie, so I was like, please tell me some things. We're clearly related, you know? And she's like, well, Kelly, at the time, it was very taboo to talk about anything relating to LGBTQ, which I'm like, I totally understand that. But I'm like, it's your book. I wanted more about their relationship because it was so ambiguous, but not in the book. So I'm not surprised that they took that route in the movie, even though it's a shitty thing to do. I'm not surprised because the time period and, you know, all the stuff that goes with it. But it's just really shitty because I wanted to hear more about them and their struggles. And like when I read the book, I kind of read it like they all just were like, oh yeah, it's their son, because they were both raising the son, but not actively acknowledging that they were together. Because when Stump and Iggy talk about him possibly going to the Sadie Hawkins dance with Peggy, I think, and he's like, or Iggy asks him, do you not like girls? And he's like, no, I'm not weird, you know? And then they just kind of like keep going. That kind of gave me, I felt like a clue, being like, okay, so a lot of people probably know they're together, but they don't want to recognize it, or like, I'm losing my word, acknowledge. Yes, thank you. They don't want to acknowledge it because they love them individually and they love what the cafe represents and what they do. So, I mean, for the time, that would be a really good thing, right? But I just wanted more from them, from the author, you know? Like, I just wanted more because I loved the two of them together. I was all for it. But yeah,
I didn't feel like I was missing on any romance from them necessarily, but because the movie does focus so strongly on their relationship, because it only has so much time, I was not expecting how much of this book was going to be dedicated to other characters.
Mm-hmm.
I did like those parts, and by the end of the book, I felt not as invested, but almost as invested in those characters as I do with Iggy and Ruth. But I was sad a little bit that there wasn't more that had to do with them and just more of them with Buddy Jr. growing up, and maybe more of them even before Ruth leaves to get married to Frank. So I didn't need romance. I just needed more.
Same.
Of more pages with them.
Same.
So I think there is a second book that focuses on Stump growing up.
The Wonder Boy of Whistle Stop.
That's right. I was trying to surreptitiously type in my Goodreads while we were recording. I was like, the Miracle Boy. I knew it was something about that. Another long title. Fannie, what's up?
Girl, it's not a nickel a word, okay? Like, let's go. You'll still be paid.
I'd be interested to read that one because I really did feel like I wasn't done with the world. Like I wasn't,
right.
I felt it was such a beautifully constructed world, and the way that it's told and all these different flashbacks kind of forces you to like build the timeline and build the structure in your own head, which I get really excited by. And so by the end of the book, I was like, I want more. I want to still live in that world. I'm not ready to leave yet.
Right.
So I'm excited to read the next book, and maybe it will have some of those extra details that you two are both kind of talking about, or that I guess Kelly was more talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
You probably won't read it, Kelly.
No, I will not. But I'm like, no.
That's okay. I'll let you know.
Yeah, but like, because I would hope Stump would have seen some behind closed doors, like conversations, or, you know, like, even if you didn't want to verbalize, like, yeah, I have two moms, like my moms are together, like any of that kind of thing. I don't even know if they would have the language to articulate a lot of that, you know, back then. But I would hope and assume that there would be something about that in that book because it's through his perspective. So I would hope he would have seen something growing up, you know?
Right.
But who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. Why don't we talk a little bit about Frank Bennett?
I'd rather not.
Wow. What a piece of shit.
Yeah, literally
Truly.
TM. He coined the term.
Yeah, like textbook sociopath, abusive piece of garbage. And I was really just so heartbreaking, right? Because Ruth was really just hoping she could love him. Like she was like, he's a good man outwardly. That's all everyone knew. And she was just ready to be his wife and start her life before she'd met Iggy. And then, she felt these feelings for Iggy, but still felt she had an obligation to fulfill. So she goes home ready and willing and like trying to make a go of it. And Frank was just the worst person alive to her and to a lot of other women. And yeah, really difficult to read about. I'm glad he got murdered.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that about a lot of people.
Yeah.
There is a part of this book, and I got kind of shivers when I read it. It's talking about Frank going into a bar, and Frank has a glass eye.
That's right.
And he leaves the bar, and this is kind of what is said after the bartender is talking to the old man who had an interaction with Frank. He poured the old man his shot. A little later, the bartender said, "Hey, old friend, how were you able to tell that his left eye was glass right off the bat like that?" The old man drank his whiskey and said, "Easy. That one was the only one with even a glimmer of human compassion in it."
Yeah, that gave me shivers just now. You reading it. Wow.
Yeah.
The storytelling.
Isn't it like I got shivers? I feel like I cried a little bit because I just felt like so. There were a lot of moments in this book. I have a lot of tabs where I felt like the way that Fannie, I love that her name is Fannie. The way that she wrote certain lines really just struck a chord in me. And even though I wasn't necessarily sad, I just felt very moved by some of these moments. And that was definitely one of them. And just that totally encapsulates everything about Frank Bennett. Everything you need to know about Frank Bennett for this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that part. He was a piece of shit. I don't even know how else to describe Frank. Like just scum of the earth, honestly. And like I felt like the world of Whistle Stop was very clearly built. Like I thought Fannie did a good job of creating the world and like having Ninny tell the story, because it really did seem like she knew all these people, she lived it, you know? I do wish though that there had been more details about characters and like some of their background stories, because even though I hated Frank, I would have loved to have gotten a bit more about him and Ruth. Like, how did they meet? Just like what that was like. How did they even get engaged? Like all these things. And I know because half of the story is told through someone else's perspective, she's not going to know all that necessarily. But then we do get the flashbacks where it's as if it's happening in real time kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I thought he was nasty. Like Tilly said, I was glad when he got murdered, because I was like, thank you. Like, you gotta go. Okay. And there was also a part, was it right before that quote you read, where they talk about just the way he treats women and how he thinks about women? And that was really disgusting to read. And I felt, unfortunately, like it was a very truthful passage. So good on you, Fannie. But I don't want to say I enjoyed that passage, because I didn't, but you know, like I thought that was very well done and very clear.
Right.
So yeah, he was disgusting. And it brings me back to like Oliver Twist. I'm thinking of is it Fagin? No.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Fagin.
with Nancy. God, that's what I got the vibes of that.
Oh, Bill.
Oh, Bill. Okay, yeah. Yeah. A lot of them are terrible in that book, so it's hard to remember who. But yeah. And I also, did you guess? I mean, Nikki saw the movie a bajillion times, but did you guess who killed Frank? Because I didn't.
I didn't either. I was very surprised. I was really leaning on I thought it was Artis.
Oh.
Their son, just because he had so many violent tendencies, but then, like Big George's son, but then that's explained later because he witnessed the murder. And so that kind of like helped form him into the man that he turned out to be, which, you know, you see a lot of glimpses of his like violence that's really latent within him, and it makes sense. But I think it's clever because it's kind of a red herring. You think that that's because, you know, he's violent because he's a murderer, but he's violent because he witnessed a murder and didn't know how to process and didn't get the help that he needed as a child to like understand.
Right.
So yeah, no, I thought that was a cleverly done reveal, because it's really kept until the very, very end.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't know that it was Sipsy, because in the movie, I believe Smokey Lonesome kills Frank Bennett.
Oh, that would also make sense.
Frank.
There were lots of good options for murderers of Frank.
Yeah. Frank goes into the house where Sipsy is looking after Stump, and he hits her over the head and she collapses, and he takes the baby. And as he's putting the baby in the car, Smokey comes up behind him and says, "Where are you going with Miss Ruth's baby?" And then he kills him.
Smokey was in love with her as well.
Yeah.
With Ruth.
Smokey was in love with Ruth. I thought there was, well, I mean, the whole thing is sad, and the character of Smokey Lonesome is just very sad. But I believe they say in the book, he's never done more than shake her hand. And I just, it's just so like sweet and sad. Yeah. And just a lot of things. But so I believe in the movie, it's Smokey that like deals the death blow. And then Sipsy comes out, and him and Sipsy and Big George all deal with the problem together. Smokey takes the truck and puts it in the lake, and Big George and Sipsy dismember the body and feed it to some of the KKK members the next day.
Yeah, I was going to say, did I read that right? They put him in a stew?
They put him in the hog pot.
Mash him, boil him, put him in a stew.
Oh my God.
Little Lord of the Rings reference for you.
Stick him in a stew.
Stick him. Okay, thank you. Stick him in a stew. That's what happened.
Who did you think killed Frank Bennett, Kelly?
I went for the obvious. I thought it was going to be Ruth or Iggy, or like a combination of the two, because I was just like, okay, ladies, let's go. You know, like
Right.
I did wonder if it was Ruth as well, because I think there's a section where Iggy's talking to Stump about bravery, and she says, like, your mom's very brave, and he said, like, Mom, she's so shy, like, she's not brave at all. And Iggy says it's very cryptic, like, she did one brave thing once a long time
Yeah,
ago.
she
And I
did
was like,
something, and he says what? And she says something. Her and Big George are the two bravest people I know.
right.
So that does lead you to think even Iggy thinks that Ruth is the one that killed Frank, which
It's
is
true.
Yeah. Or does she mean them leaving?
You never know. There's so many
Yeah.
good questions.
I don't know. I do want to say, like, going back to Smokey, I thought he was a heartbreaking character. But I go back to my point I said earlier about Frank. I wanted to know more about him because I left feeling with a lot of the minor characters that I just didn't have enough time with them or know enough about them to truly understand or like feel as much as I wanted to feel for them, because the recommendation I gave, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, I feel like she does a really good job of really getting in there with all the different characters, versus this one, because there were so many characters and so many different plot lines, I personally didn't get enough time. So while I was sad about him dying, and especially when he was like so in love with her, and like you said, he only touched her hand, that was the most he had ever, you know, with Ruth. But I'm just like, for me reading it, I was kind of like, okay, this feels like it's sad just to be sad, because I didn't get enough from him. So that was one of the moments where I was like, why is this here? Is it just to be sad? And am I forgetting? I think I am forgetting. Was Smokey white or black? Because I don't remember.
white.
White? Okay, great. Because I feel like there was a lot of heartbreak for a lot of people in here, but there's also a lot of heartbreak for black people, which makes sense because of the time and where they were. But yeah, I was like, okay, wait, was he white or black? Okay. Yeah. I just needed more time, I think, because there were so many people. It painted a vivid picture in terms of where I was, but I didn't know enough to care enough about everyone, if that makes sense.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think a lot of the characters are not surface level exactly, but you do get more from some of the characters than you do from some of the others. And I think that can have two effects, right? Either you can like kind of say, I'm not getting enough, I need more, I don't understand, or you can like try and put all this other stuff automatically onto this small character, which I think is what I did. You know, I had a very small jumping off point and my brain just filled in the rest, and then I was like, oh, I know exactly who that character is, even though the author didn't tell me. So I think that comes down to like the different ways we were enjoying the book too, where I was like so ready to like let it all happen to me. And I think you were just like kind of fed up at that point, it sounds like.
Well, I wasn't fed up necessarily. Like, I did have quite a few moments like throughout the book where I was like, oh, this is interesting. But then we were on to the next thing so quickly that I was like,
right.
And I didn't feel like sometimes when you're like, oh, it wasn't enough, but I want to know more. I felt like, no, I want more. Where are we going? You know?
Right.
So
Yeah, I did
know.
find myself after finishing some of the chapters, I would like put it down, where in other books I would maybe keep reading because I want to know more.
Yes.
I found I would put it down and just let it like sit with me for a bit. And that I think helped a little bit, where I kind of took my time. Not to say like this is not something that you did or anything like that, but just I'm just kind of like working through my experience of the book on the air, live with the fans. So I think that kind of helped as well, where I had this little like percolation going on, kind of filling in some of the little details that weren't necessarily present in the book.
Right.
So there's a chapter where Stump is talking to Iggy, which I already brought up before, about the Sadie Hawkins dance. And I thought it was a very tender moment, you know? Aunt Iggy, basically his second mom, right? Is his second mom, talking to him about, you know, why are you nervous? What's going on? What's happening? And, you know, little old reader me was like, oh, clearly he is self-conscious about his disability, you know? And I thought, oh, this is a really nice tender moment between mother figure and son talking about relationships and all this stuff. And then the abrupt ending of the chapter with her driving him over to the local sex worker and friend. I forget her name now. Essie? No. Eva, thank you. Oh my gosh. I can't remember their names. Eva. I just got so annoyed because I understand the time and all this stuff, but I was like, just, you have this nice little moment, and then she drove down to Eva's house. But she didn't even say Eva. She just implied that was the house they went to because she gave like specific details that we know are Eva's house. And I was like, okay, you know, like I was so annoyed because I really liked the conversation. And then it was just like, we're going to the sex worker. Here you go. Get it figured out, you know, like, ugh.
I don't think that's supposed to be normal. I think that's Iggy being unusual.
Yeah.
And that's how Iggy found out about sex, was she went to Eva's house and had someone there to like hold her when she was upset and feeling self-conscious and sad. And so that's all she knew how to pass on to her son. I don't think it was correct. I think it was strange. But yeah, I guess that's all there is to it. It's just another example of Itchy being the character she is.
Yeah. That's just a Kelly thing, being annoyed at what happened, but it's like, whatever, Kelly. I was just like, come on. It was so nice. And then, like, God. But also, I want to bring up again, before I forget, I couldn't believe that Iggy went, like, every weekend, I think she said, for 4 years to check up on Ruth. That's a lot. That's a lot. I'm like, that is a plot device that you needed to put in so that you could check up on Ruth, you know? Whoa, that's a lot of travel.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What did you guys think about Evelyn? We talked a lot about Whistle Stop, but we haven't really talked about Evelyn.
I found a lot of Evelyn's sections to be, I'm almost 30 and I'm not at the same point in my life as she is, but a lot of her feelings about aging I found to be so poignant as to almost be painful.
Yeah.
Especially in this time that we're living through where so much of our lives feel stagnant. I found a lot I could relate to with Evelyn, and being a more soft-spoken woman who wants to behave her best all the time to avoid people being unpleasant to her.
Yeah.
I found a lot I could connect to with Evelyn, and I was very happy to see her thriving at the end.
Yeah. I really loved her alter ego Tawanda.
Oh yeah.
And this part I just loved. And while Evelyn went about her business with a smile, Tawanda was busy poking child molesters with electric cattle prods until their hair stood on end. She placed tiny bombs inside Playboy and Penthouse magazines that would explode when they were opened. She gave dope dealers overdoses and left them in the streets to die. Forced that doctor who had told her mother she had cancer to walk down the street naked while the entire medical profession, including dentists and oral hygienists, jeered and threw rocks. A merciful avenger. She always waited until he finished his walk and then beat his brains out with a sledgehammer. And just like the joy that she gets from imagining these situations where she takes everybody that has ever done her wrong or looks like they could have done her wrong, and she puts them in their place with this like superhero woman Tawanda. I love that. I think that's great.
Too. Yeah. I love that too. And I also loved that at the end of everything, she realized that wasn't the right way either. Like that having your anger be so all-consuming is like not the way to live your life either. So I loved that part was there. God knows I've been there myself, but I also loved that at the end of the day, it was about you need to find something else within you that can help you like regulate these emotions, and you need to be your own kind of avenger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in smaller ways.
Yeah, I agree with Tilly, with like feeling like you could connect with Evelyn, even though like we're younger than Evelyn, we have different situations than Evelyn. I felt like she was very relatable and you could connect to her pretty easily, I think. I I also love that part with Tawanda. I feel like we all have an inner Tawanda just waiting to burst out. But in chapter 9, I had my least and most favorite part in the same chapter. My least favorite was Ninny talking about, and I had the audiobook, okay? So I had the narrator going, don't you just think bugs are so cute? Aren't they just the cutest things ever? I'm like, are you kidding me? Bugs are disgusting, okay? So
bugs. I was like, what are you saying?
Bugs.
What is that word?
Bugs. Yeah.
Bugs. Got it.
She was like, don't you think bugs are just the cutest things you ever did see? I'm like, no, I don't, actually. And she went on to talk about how she loves bugs, and I was like, can't relate. But going back to Evelyn, my favorite part is also in that chapter, and I want to read the little passage because this, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And then I'll talk about what happened after because there's more. But chapter 9. Actually, I guess it's not chapter 9. I have a weird ebook, so it's not chapter 9. Never mind that. But it's in the same section. And this is all going on through Evelyn's head after she gets called names at the grocery store or in the parking lot.
Right.
And she thinks to herself, yes, oh my God. She thinks to herself, what was this power, this insidious threat, this invisible gun to her head that controlled her life, this terror of being called names? She had stayed a virgin so she wouldn't be called a tramp or a slut, had married so she wouldn't be called an old maid, faked orgasms so she wouldn't be called frigid, had children so she wouldn't be called barren, had not been a feminist because she didn't want to be called queer and a man-hater, never nagged or raised her voice so she wouldn't be called a bitch. She had done all that, and yet, still, this stranger had dragged her into the gutter with the names that men call women when they are angry. Evelyn wondered, why always sexual names? And why, when men wanted to degrade other men, did they call them pussies, as if that was the worst thing in the world? What have we done to be thought of that way? And I was like, yes, Evelyn, thank you. And I mean, I don't know, because I wasn't there in the 80s or before. I don't know what was going on with feminism. There was definitely a huge wave from the 60s, 70s. But I was like, this is still relevant to today, and we're still talking about this today, you know? And I myself am having these thoughts and revelations and questions inside my head and soul being like, why? What is the point? Why do I, shut up and be quiet, shut up and smile? You know, what you're saying, Tilly, like, I don't want to upset people because I want people to be angry with me or, call me or anything, right? So I think that's super relatable. And I was like, yes, I love this section. I want her to go through this huge change. I think she is on the path to a huge change because it's definitely not a direct path for any of us. But that's why I was let down at the end when she goes to a quote unquote fat camp. I know that was very of the time.
A big old bummer.
Yes, it was very of the time. I remember watching older Oprah episodes where she talks about going to a fat camp herself in the 80s. And it made me so sad because, it was written like she's starting again. She's building herself back up. And I just felt that it was such a downer. And that's probably just from us reading it today,
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think so too, because I think what I chose to take from it, because I found that very upsetting.
Yeah.
As a modern woman.
Mm-hmm.
But what I chose to take from it was that it's meant to portray a community, that she's found a community of people who feel the same things that she do. And she starts selling Mary Kay cosmetics door to door.
Her pink
and,
convertible.
Working on
she gets the convertible.
Working on herself and being more present.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think it's meant to. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Like it's a very 80s idea, but I think it's meant to stand in to let us know that she's working on herself in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a lot of things that were very 80s about this book. The class she mentions at the beginning where all the women take mirrors and look at their vaginas.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And I'm just...
I would have left too. I would have been like, okay. I can do this at home for free, okay? I don't need to... Oh my God. I also, I loved the part... It's right before she leaves to go to the fat camp where they say, like, she has sex with her husband and she has an orgasm and then he, like, gets freaked out.
Oh yeah.
I just love that part. I just picture his face like, oh my God, like what has happened to my life?
Not just any orgasm. It said she had the most enormous orgasm, and it scared him.
Yes.
And I was like, good on you, girl.
I loved that part. I thought it was hilarious. And so like, yeah, but yeah. So I didn't hate it. It just wasn't all for me, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I couldn't say it was all for me either. I think I had my issues with it as well. I think I just got very swept away by my feelings at the end of it.
Yeah, that's fair. What did you guys think of the ending in the book? Because I know you talked about the movie versus the book.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably cried like almost the whole last like 50 pages.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like
I was pretty weepy.
I was listening to the audiobook, and so I listened to the audiobook that's narrated by Lorna Raver, not the one that's narrated by Fannie Flagg. And so I believe this, well, they must have done this one after the movie came out, because Lorna Raver sounds exactly like Jessica Tandy in the movie. So that gave me a whole other level of like connection, because I was hearing and imagining this person that I've seen on screen so many times telling the same story. But man, I ugly cried. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm like cross stitching, and I have the audiobook on in my bed, and I'm like, like it was a lot. There was a lot of feelings happening. I was happy.
Yeah.
I was really sad. I was sad that the book was over. There was a lot.
I'm right there with you. I cried a lot. Yeah. And for all the same reasons. Happy, sad, sad and happy. Happy to be sad. All of them.
And I was not expecting like the last chapter with Iggy. So I just collected myself, and then talks about Iggy giving the jar of honey to the little girl, and then I was like crying all over again.
The beach armor.
Yeah.
I knew from the first page that Ninny was going to die at the end of the book. I'm just like, oh no. So I was gearing up the whole time. I don't like reading about elderly people dying in books, or I mean anyone dying in books. It's fine.
I don't think you're alone there.
I know. So I was gearing myself up the whole book. So I was like a sealed vault at the end. I did feel sad, definitely, for her passing. And I did like that she gave her a box of memories so that she could see the people she was telling her about. I thought that was very sweet. I kind of wish there wasn't the last little bit with the child and Iggy. Personally, I think I would have rather just had it end with the note on the grave, and kept it with Evelyn, just because for me, the last bit was kind of like, okay, but we know the girl is not going to see her again, because Iggy's like, you come back now, and I'm like, she's not though. You know what I mean? Or at least I don't think she is. So I don't know. I feel like it was just like an extra little thought that I didn't really need for the end of the book, but I liked that she got to go to Whistle Stop and
I'm sorry, I'm having a moment. You keep going. I'm going to tell you something funny after.
I was like, what?
No, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to be not distracting.
Yeah, I just thought it was an extra thought that I didn't really need, because I thought it was really touching with her going to Whistle Stop and meeting the neighbors and seeing the house where she lived. And yeah, so I thought that was really nice. But the last little bit to me was kind of like, okay. And now it's done. Like, I was just kind of like, okay. But anyways.
Right.
I just realized why I was so emotional, I think, at the end with the whole graveyard and everything. It's just how the Phantom of the Opera ends, with the note on the grave and the expectation that he still loves her and he's there. And the Phantom of the Opera is like a moment in time for me. The first time I ever felt so connected to something and felt like a part of something romantic and beautiful, and like
that's why we all have emotional issues.
We have a lot to unpack.
Yes. I know. I've been unpacking it for years. I just want to say it's within me, that emotion, and that's what I felt, and I think that's what I drew from.
There's like a little musical monkey box on Ruth's grave.
Don't even get me started.
Oh my God. When Evelyn gets the box of memories and she's she's kind of talking to Ninny through this narrative and stuff, and she talks about how she has a picture of Ninny on her desk. I think it's Ninny and Cleo and Albert, and she says, my clients came in and said, oh, you look so much like your mother.
I know.
Wasn't that so nice? Like,
that was nice.
So lovely.
So many feelings.
That was very sweet. There were some very nice moments in this book.
Yeah. There's a lot of feelings happening.
I'm having a lot of feelings.
So speaking of sad moments,
Oh boy.
so this was one of my favorite parts in the book, and I'm going to try not to cry while I'm reading it because that would be like embarrassing.
Only we
Hey,
can.
So-
listen, as someone who has cried on this podcast at
Me
least
too.
once, possibly more, it's your turn and you can do it.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Thanks for the support.
You're welcome. We're here for you.
So this happens in one of the chapters where you're actually hearing Ninny talk to Evelyn about the past. It's not just the kind of flashback. And it's right after Ruth passes away. And Ninny says, I never will forget what she said standing there in front of that door. She said, Miss Ruth is a lady and always knew when to leave a party. And this wasn't going to be any exception as long as she was around. So I just thought that was so beautiful, so poignant, and so very sad. And just like Miss Ruth, we also know when to leave a party. So this is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening to this, everybody. This is the BYOB podcast. If you enjoyed this and you want to hear more from us, you can head over to our social media accounts to keep up to date on all things BYOB. We've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, the works. Stay tuned after this to hear the first line of our next read, the popular YA supernatural mystery novel, The Diviners by Libba Bray. See you next time, and until then, keep on drinking in great stories. Cheers!
Next time on BYOB, the Bring Your Own Book podcast. In a townhouse at a fashionable address on Manhattan's Upper East Side, every lamp blazes.